Coming up next, we've got a man many of you will recognize. He's an engineer, producer, composer, guitarist, author, much, much more. Plus, he's got an incredibly popular YouTube channel where he's never shy about sharing his opinions. Please welcome, live at GearFest 2021, the one and only Rick Beato. It's great to see you, Rick.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah, man. We talked at Winter NAMM a couple of years ago, but with pandemic and everything, we haven't been able to connect since then. So it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here.
You're very welcome. Great to be here.
So, man, I was running down some of the stats. I have to make, normally I can do an interview without any notes or anything, but you got so much going on. I got to have actually notes to refer to because, wow, I don't know how you manage all the directions you're going in at the same time.
I don't either.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, let's just run down a few of these. 2.4 million subscribers on your channel. And actually, since I did this the other day, there's probably now 2.5. They're racking up every day. 7.5 million views a month and 250,000, a quarter of a million views a day. Man, that's just incredible. Yeah,
it's the internet's a powerful thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's only since 2015. And I mean, that's meteoric.
Yeah, I started my channel in the summer of 2016, so it's been 5 years. I just had my 5-year anniversary about 2 weeks ago. So
right, pretty amazing. Give us a quick rundown of how you got to this point. I mean, there have been hit records in there, there've been studios in there, there've been master's degrees. Give us a quick rundown.
So I went to school in the 80s, starting in 1980. I got an undergrad degree in classical bass. I got a master's in jazz guitar. I finished my master's at New England Conservatory in 1986. And then I was a college professor from 87 to 92 up in Ithaca, New York at Ithaca College. I taught jazz studies. And then I got signed to a publishing deal by Polygram. I was writing songs with a buddy of mine. He got signed to a publishing deal. So I quit my college teaching gig to try and be a songwriter, and then got signed with a band to Universal Records, made a record came out for a couple weeks, and we got dropped because there was these big mergers in 1999, and in the meantime I had started producing bands, and I did that up until 2016 when I started my YouTube channel. I produced bands full-time and had some hit records, but I took all that knowledge that I gathered from classical music, jazz, and rock and production and turned it into my YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't know you were a college professor. That actually explains a lot because your explanations and things are so clear and you go so deep into so many of those topics. One of the things that fascinates me about it is that most people who have a YouTube channel, they're pretty targeted, they're pretty specific, and they work in their lane, right? I'm a shred guitar player, or I'm a mix engineer, or I'm working with plugins, whereas you, man, you cover everything from music theory to guitar to production to all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I called my channel Everything Music when I started it, and that's kind of what it is. I bounce around from topic to topic, and I did a video on auto-tune this past week, and then I went from that video and I made a video on the most complex pop song ever. And I mean, I just did a video on Alan Holdsworth recently, and so yeah, I'm kind of all over the place.
Well, that's got to be both fun and freeing, but also kind of a challenge, right? Because when you're in a really targeted lane, it's maybe more obvious what you need to be working on, what you're doing next. Is it easier to come up with topics when you can do whatever you want, or does that make it even harder?
It's easier in some ways. I have a couple big series like this What Makes This Song Great series. I've done 105 episodes, and so I break down famous songs. I've been doing that for about 3 years or so. The last one I did was Kiss from a Rose by Seal. I had Seal in the video, and that's been a really successful series. But that goes anywhere from the Beatles to Pink Floyd to Korn to Tool. I do all different genres of music, metal, rock, just everything from the 60s through the present day. And then I have these what I call countdown videos. I do a lot of top 10, top 20 lists, top 20 acoustic guitar intros, top 20 guitar solos, top 20, drum intros, keyboard intros, or So I like to mix it up with those things in addition to all the other kind of content I make, the teaching content.
Right, right. Is it ever an issue of what we call here option anxiety? Too many things that you could possibly be doing?
No. I typically have, I don't have any videos saved up or anything. I make one video at a time. But I will typically come up with the idea in the morning and then make the video and put it out by 2 o'clock or so.
No way. That fast?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, sometimes it takes sometimes it'll take a day. I did a video about 6 months ago where I reimagined Stairway to Heaven, the guitar solo. And I had, it was actually the day before Eddie Van Halen passed away. So I had myself, I imitated what I thought Peter Frampton would have played on I built the solo section of Stairway to Heaven. I played what I thought Peter Frampton would play. My buddy Phil X played what he thought Van Halen would have played, and then Eric Johnson was in the video as well. And I called Eric. I said, I want you to play what you would play on Stairway to Heaven. He's like,
right.
I mean, if I was soloing over it, I said, yeah, just video yourself soloing over Stairway to Heaven. I have the tracks. I sent it to him, and that video was so that video took a little bit of time to do because that took more preparation. But a lot of the videos I make pretty quickly, just on the spur of the moment.
So how big of a team do you have? Is it? I mean, you just call everybody, they show up and you shoot in the morning and it's edited by the afternoon, or is it you doing it all?
I have one assistant and that's it.
Really?
So I shoot and I edit most of my videos. I pretty much edit my videos, or my assistant will help out. But if I do a video like that where I have a drummer come in, if I'm going to play, most of the time I'll play everything that's needed, unless I need a drummer. Even though I play drums too, then I'll have a drummer come in and we'll kind of, I might have a couple of different people come in and play. So then I have to organize it. But typically I make the videos on my own.
Wow, that's impressive. So I would imagine then that you kind of have a set, your gear is kind of set up and you can just walk in and turn the power on and get to work?
Yeah, I have my camera. I have multiple camera setups here. Everything mic'd up. I have lights all over the place. So if I go in the control room, or if I'm in my drum room down the hall, or if I'm here in the live room, wherever I go, I have camera and lights set up.
Right.
Which is very handy. That's and Mitch, that's probably the most time-consuming thing for making any type of video content is the setup.
Yep. Yeah, it always takes a lot longer to set up than to actually shoot the video and do the whole thing. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, or even doing a gig, it takes longer to set up than how long it takes to play the gig. So.
Right. Wow. So, but in addition to that, okay, so you're shooting videos. Is that one day a week you do that, or do you do that several days a week?
No, I do that every day.
Every day? But then beyond that, you've also got Instagram guitar lessons, and now you have the Quick Lessons Pro that you've come out with. You've got the Beato book, you've got the Beato Club. Run us through some of those other things that take up time during your day.
So I usually post on Instagram every morning. I get up and I'll practice. I'll get down here, I'll turn on the camera, and I'll teach a guitar lesson on Instagram. This Quick Lessons thing I've been doing since 2019, and it's basically a 1-minute guitar lesson, but it's a concept that I'll introduce. So I've been doing it since 2019, and those things get 100, 200, 250,000 views. So
right.
I just came out with a course, Quick Lessons Pro, that is, I took all the biggest ones. I have 28 lessons, full-length lessons that I did from my biggest posts, and I'm continuing to add stuff on it. So I just released that 1 week ago today. So that's my new thing. I have a book, my Beato book that I wrote when I was a college professor 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's a music theory, improvisation textbook essentially. And so so I start my day with that, and then I'll start filming my videos then that's pretty much all I do.
You've added another thing on there, though, because you've got the Beato Club now, and there's 4 levels with that, right? There's the kind of regular and the gold and prime and the platinum, which is sold out. But one of the aspects of the platinum is that you'll actually listen to what the member of the club is working on and give them feedback on it.
Yeah.
How many people are you doing that with in the platinum part of the club?
Well, I've reduced down because my time is, the reason it's been closed for the past year and a half or so is because I just don't have the bandwidth to do much of that, because I actually make videos for those. I make reaction videos for those, and it's more like it's kind of like a pre-production video. I help people with their writing and their arrangements, their mixing, things like that. So it's actually fun to do. It's just at this point it's difficult to. I'm just one person, and so I don't have as much time to do that. So although I really like doing it.
Yeah, I imagine that's fun. Do the people who send the stuff in, they take the criticism and the suggestions pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'll say something like, okay, in this part, you're going to the third in the melody, and you have the third in the bass. It would sound stronger if you changed the voicing to this, and sang the same melody note, or change the melody note to this, or change the chord to this, and then I would demonstrate it.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things, or might be, the kick drum pattern would be better if this, or or mix tips, whatever people are interested in getting my opinion on, my advice.
Sure. One of the things that I think makes that so valuable, and one of the things that makes your channel really stand out, is your depth of knowledge in so many areas. I mean, you're an accomplished musician, you've done so much studio work, you mentioned music theory, ear training, all those kind of things. It's one of the differences, I think, with many of the other channels where people are just jumping in and maybe don't have that depth behind them. How important is that to what you do? Do you do a lot of research before you start, or are you able to just sit down and do the videos off the top of your head?
Most of the videos I can do off the top of my head. I just did a video 2 days ago that was I called it the most complex pop song of all time, and it's a Sergio Mendes song from 1983, "Never Gonna Let You Go," and
right.
and it just occurred to me. I was talking to my buddy Smitty on the phone, and he reminded me of the gig, and I said, oh, that would be a great video, because it was one of the funniest gigs we ever had, and we tried to learn this song that has 22 modulations in it. So I made a video of the song, and as I'm making the video, it reminded me that I had to read it. I had to write it out, read it, and it's just as difficult as it was then. He and I thought, this was the #1 song, and this girl that was singing said, I'll play it for you guys. And so we're thinking, okay, we can learn anything. It's probably 4 chords or so. It does the intro, and then immediately it goes from F sharp major to G minor. I was like, okay, that's weird. But then it just keeps changing keys over and over and over, and he and I are looking at each other. Are we going to write a chart? No. Oh, no, we can remember this. And then we just completely botched it.
Right.
And it was hilarious. But to this day, I can't think of a song has this weird chord, as complex of a chord progression as this.
Right. A bunch of us actually were watching that video the other day, and we were laughing about it. And Don Carr, who's playing in the band here and does videos here at Sweetwater with me, he actually covered that song in the 80s as well. And, there's songs that have a lot of chords. And, fusion songs and things will have a lot of chords, but man, so many modulations all at once. But the beautiful thing about it is it works, right?
It does work. You don't even notice it with the melody. Most people never even, will hear it, and the melody sounds normal.
Right.
But then when you go to play it, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
So.
So
I don't think a lot of bands were covering it back then. Mitch.
Probably not. Or if they were doing a very simplified version of it, right?
Exactly.
So I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit here. You have kind of almost established yourself as a replacement for what we used to have in the magazines and things of music critics who would sit down and listen to music and comment on it and things. And you've been doing a lot of that. From that vantage point, have you been able to discern what makes a great song?
Well, it's kind of changed, I think, over the years. Things like harmony are not as important in music to today's listeners, I would say, at least in popular music. It's hard to generalize because we used to be so chart driven, and nowadays with Spotify, Apple Music, people, kind of pick and choose, and they tend to not go to the charts, or they create their own playlists, or the algorithm will suggest things for them to listen to based on what they like. So things are decentralized in that way. But as far as hits nowadays, hits are kind of decided by whatever are the things that are streamed the most. So to actually say what makes a hit is you're saying whatever gets streamed the most now, you know?
Right.
Not something that's been curated, although it is curated by the people on Spotify, for example. There are people that actually put together the lists. Almost every chart is all major label bands still. I mean, just like old school radio. But what are people listening to? You know, the pop charts are typically, most of the music is far simpler than it was back 30 years ago, 20 years ago. That's the only generalization that I can make about it. This is probably the most diverse stylistically what's going on as far as the there's so many different genres and subgenres now that are kind of accounted for on these platforms. So it's yeah, you know, to say what is a hit song is difficult since it's not really radio driven anymore. So that's my way of not answering your question, Mitch.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I was watching, for example, the one you did with the top 10 songs on iTunes, where you were going through the top 10 and playing along with them and making some comments and things. And this idea of music seeming to be heading in a more simple direction. What do you think's driving that?
I think that people, when I was growing up, I never went into a recording studio. I didn't know anyone that went into a recording studio. The only people that went into recording studios were people that were either huge acts that were unsigned or signed acts. That was it. Nowadays, anybody can have Pro Tools, anybody can have Logic, anybody can have Ableton. They have it on their computer. They plug into their Apollo Twin or their, you know, Focusrite or whatever they have as their interface. They have plugins, and they can make a song in an hour, and then they can put it up on Bandcamp, on SoundCloud, on wherever. And they don't necessarily have to go through the craft. You know, you don't have to be a phenomenal musician to get a gig like you used to have to be when I was growing up. And I don't mean this as like, oh, the old guy, it used to be better in the old days. The fact of the matter is that you couldn't get a gig unless you could play really well. And you tended to have bands that would have multiple people that could sing in the band. That's why you got bands like the Eagles and most of the bands back in the day, Journey, whoever it was, every person in the band could sing. So it was like, not only could you play your instrument well, you could sing live, and that's how you got gigs. So now anybody can do anything. You can use pitch correction. That can be part of your whole thing, is that, you know, so you can make music, you can make records in your house. Billie Eilish with her brother, they make records on their own. They don't need anybody. And but I find her music really interesting. So, but most people, they don't need to have, you know, a George Martin there to write an orchestral arrangement for them, or Rick Rubin to produce their songs, and they're not going to, they may not go in the direction, or Jay Graydon or whoever is producing that has a lot of knowledge, Brendan O'Brien, whoever that can say, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you go here? The song would be better if you did this, or why don't you try a part like this? So I think music's gotten simpler because there's not as many experts involved, and even the songwriters that they get involved when they get these groups of 11 people writing a song or stealing someone else's song, they tend to, you know, it's music by committee, which tends to make it a lot simpler anyways.
Interesting. Do you think that has been affected with everyone being locked down? We've seen a lot more long-distance collaboration going on, where people are sending things off and playing on things. So there's less of that interaction, but at the same time, when it's just you're a little more free to put what you want to put onto a recording and do it that way. How do you think that's affected things?
Well, everybody kind of working on their own stuff. Obviously, as you know, the gear sales and things have gone crazy over the last year. More people have bought guitars and keyboards and interfaces and microphones than ever before. People are taking up instruments. I've noticed that guitars have come back on the charts. On the video you were referring to, on the listening to iTunes, every 9 out of the 10 songs were guitar driven, that's unusual compared to 10 years ago. Yeah, a lot of the big songs were guitar driven, but it's cool that guitars made this comeback. So people collaborating like that, experimenting on their own I think is really a great thing.
Right, right. If you watching this and getting the music in that you're getting and looking at everything that's on the charts, what do you think is the one thing that musicians can be doing to elevate their ability to perform and to be creative when they're recording?
Well, I think it's important to get to know, to learn songs, and that's how people historically became better as songwriters. They would learn other people's songs. They played in cover bands. The Beatles were a cover band from 1957 to 1962, learning 1,000 songs before they recorded their first record. Right. And they were experts at multiple genres of music and 3-part harmonies, 4-part harmonies, whatever. And to get good at writing songs, you need to write a lot of songs, and you need to study songwriting. And the best way to do that is to learn songs, I think.
Right, right.
So,
I thought you were going to say ear training. Your videos, I mean, when you sit down and you're able to just play along with the song, again, back in the day or whatever, that was a key thing, right? I mean, you'd sit down and you'd figure out the song and you'd play it maybe that night, kind of a thing.
Well, that's the way you learn the songs is the ear training.
Okay.
So when I say right, so that's the next step. People, when I make my videos, I do the top 10 countdown on Spotify, whatever genre it is, it doesn't matter. When I hear the songs, I know how to play them, like immediately. Even if they're hard songs, because I've done so much I used to teach ear training, and if you know your intervals, and you have a vocabulary of recognized sounds, as I call them, meaning you hear an add 9 chord, a major add 9 chord, you know what the sound of that is. Oh, I know that sound, or I know what a minor add 9 or a dominant 11 is, or a minor 11 or a major 7 sharp 11 chord, whatever it is. If you just recognize these things instantly, and you can tell what the intervals from the bass notes are, between the bass notes, it's very easy to figure out chord progressions and figure out songs. So you can learn them like that and then play them on the gig.
Right, right. One of the things that I've noticed is that because we're all working at home so much, and even with the rise of YouTube and social media, so many of us are focused on just the one thing we do. Like, I'm a guitar player, so I'm going to sit home and so I can do an impressive video on YouTube, which is great. And I love seeing 5-year-olds who can play 6 times better than me. But but it also leads to, as you mentioned, back in the day, you had to be able to sing, right? You had to learn the other parts of the song as well. You had to be able to get on stage and interact with the drummer and the bass player and things. Talk a little bit about what difference that makes for a musician performing live versus being in the studio.
Well, ensemble playing is something that everybody should do as much as they can, because that's one of the things that when I was growing up, being in a band, running your own rehearsals, figuring out arrangements, learning how to play with a drummer, learning how to play with a bass player, or learning how to play with a guitar player, whatever it is, and then how to play behind a song, behind a singer, and not step all over them. All these skills that you learn from playing with other musicians are different than if you're playing with a drum machine or a programmed thing, because time is not necessarily a gridded thing. I played in the 80s with Vinnie Colaiuta, who's one of the greatest drummers in the world, and playing with Vinnie is a unique experience. And sometimes Vinnie would go on these things, and you'd have to really know where you were, right? He'd be doing some metric modulation or something, and he'd be playing go into a beat of 4, but based on a quarter note triplet or something, but you had to know where the pulse was, because Vinny's going to come right back in the right spot 16 bars later.
Right.
So that's, and the fact that he's improvising, the only way that you can actually get that experience is if you play with other people.
Yeah, that's key, right? My buddy Bob and I had a band here called Expanding Man, and Nick DiVirgilio, who's in the Fort Wayne Most Dangerous Band here at Gearfest, was a drummer, and sometimes we'd be playing a song, and all of a sudden he'd shift into 11, or shift into 7, or 13, or 9, or something, and we'd be trying to play these, classic, dad rock songs. But he'd always come right back on the beat as long as we could stay with him, which is always kind of a challenge. But that's the fun part too, right? When you're interacting with other musicians.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. I encourage people to, as soon as they can, to start playing with other musicians, in whatever, if it's a duo, if it's a trio, whatever. But having to adapt to other people's time feels and stuff like that is really important. It's much better than, it's just as important as playing with a drum machine or a click or anything like that, or probably more important, because you have to learn to adapt and play with feel and not rely on playing with a perfect metronome.
Right. Right. So what about sound quality? How have you seen that evolve over all these songs you've been looking at? Do things sound better today, or has sound regressed, or where are we at with all that?
Well, it depends. Okay, so I'll generalize here. I think a lot of the songs on the metal charts don't sound as good as they did back during the height of nu metal 20 years ago. And one of the reasons is that a lot of people are making records on their own. They don't have experts involved. For example, mixers. Andy Wallace mixed a lot of my favorite records back in the 90s and the 2000s. He did the first two Rage Against the Machine records. He did Linkin Park. He did Nirvana Nevermind. He did System of a Down, some of their big records, and his records always sounded massive. And the producers that they would work with, Don Gilmore that did Linkin Park, and made great sounding records. And they were in studios that had Neve consoles, and they would get mixed on SSL consoles. Up until '99, they were all recorded on tape, on 48-track analog. But when you have those experts involved that really know how to get great guitar sounds, great drum sounds, everything's in phase. These are the kind of things that I notice that some of the sound quality of especially guitar-driven records, is not necessarily up to par with where it was when you had pros pro producers, Joe Barresi, people like that were incredible engineers and producers and mixers, right, when they were making the records.
One of the things I've come across here the last few years is I've rediscovered using 100-watt amplifiers. And so even if I'm using aux or whatever, even if I'm going direct from the amp, I was using small amps, because who cares, right? You're running into a direct thing, or whatever you're doing, you're using an IR or whatever. But I have found that it's a big difference when you go to a 100-watt amp with that bigger transformer and those extra tubes.
Yes, so case in point, I have about, probably about 40 100-watt amplifiers over there. I have probably about 60 guitar amps here or so, but probably at least 40 100-watt amps, and I'm a huge fan of that. And I agree 100%, Mitch, with you on that.
Yeah,
I have seen plenty of combos as well too, but I love big amps with big transformers and things.
It seems to make a big difference, right? I've noticed lately you've been playing a lot of guitars with P90s.
I love P90s. Yeah, I have a new Gibson Signature coming out. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about that, but yeah, that's coming out soon. That has P90s. I have a Les Paul Special. It's a Les Paul Special, Pelham Blue Les Paul Special, and I play a yellow, TV yellow Les Paul Special a lot. That has P90s. I love the sound of P90s. I have an SG that has them. I have a Gold Top that has them. But I play humbuckers as well.
Sure.
But I really like P90s. I think they're incredibly versatile.
Right. I have to pat myself on the back there. I had heard a rumor about your signature, so I subtly worked in that P90 thing just so you could go there.
Yeah, so I that's the thing that I like. I don't turn my guitar up all the way. I use my volume knob a lot when I'm playing, and I think that's a thing that P90s are great. You can really change the tone of them just by adjusting your volume knob.
Right.
And they can sound really beefy if you crank it all the way open, and then you back it way down to 2, and then you get this beautiful crystal chimey, clean sounds, but that still have fatness to them.
Right, right. Man, Rick, thanks so much for taking time to sit down with us today. It's been such a pleasure to have you here at GearFest and to be able to extract all those nuggets of wisdom and knowledge from you. You're such a deep well, and it's been a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thanks, Mitch. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I wish we could go longer, and I hope you'll come out here to Sweetwater sometime. We can sit down and do an extended interview or do something together. That'd be fun.
Would love to.
Right on. Take care,
Thanks.
my friend. Good to see you.
You too.
Our thanks to Rick Beato for joining us live. It's great to have him here as part of GearFest 2021, and thank you for joining us.